So let's talk about gearing up in Diablo 4. What are some of the traps you should avoid falling into while leveling, how to not waste resources, and the best gear farms you can do in the endgame. Once you beat the main campaign, the game actually offers a lot of avenues to grab more loot, including sacred items and uniques. So today we're gonna talk about that and more, and let's jump right in. That being said, early on, before you hit level 50 and finish the main campaign, I would not worry too much about getting the perfect drops, as the rate at which you replace them is just too big. Like I explained in my perfect start guide, if you find yourself imprinting legendary aspects over and over again after just doing it a few levels before, you're kinda wasting a lot of resources. So instead, you can totally keep 5, even 10 levels with the same gear that you just imprinted before, and only change along the way the weapons which you use the most. For example, I played a Twisted Blades rogue, and that meant every few levels I was finding a dagger or a sword with significantly higher damage than the one I just imprinted. A better solution is to not imprint any aspects on these weapons that I use all the time at all, since I will just get a higher damage one anyway a few levels down the line, and instead slap the useful aspects to my build on some of the other gear pieces that get replaced less often. So in this example with the rogue, I did not use crossbows or bows at all, but they are still useful because they provide a 100% increased power to the aspects you put on them. So I could just use it on one of these, keep it for pretty much the entire duration, benefit from it, and when I did get a good dagger or a sword, I could just replace my previous ones as I did not imprint anything. Here's where the gear bonuses help a lot to make this decision, especially for two-handed weapon slots. In case you don't use them that much, they give you that 100% bonus to aspects, as well as the amulets, which give you a 50% one instead. But literally any other slot that you don't switch out often, including like rings or maybe even some of the armor pieces, you can totally use those instead and only switch them when you absolutely have to, in case you're way too squishy. Now, during leveling, as well as you complete side missions and open world events, you will get Obols and Obol caches that you can then use at the gambling vendor to basically buy random gear. Now, since the cap on these is 1,000 and you likely reach that fairly soon, here are a couple of ways I use to be a bit more efficient with them. One, if you get Obol caches, especially from the missions, just save them in your bank for later on because you don't need to waste them right now. No need to claim them since they don't go anywhere and you can just keep them off for the max cap or once you reach a much higher level. Second of all, you might want to consider buying some of the special keys down at the bottom in the inventory screen when you buy it from the gacha vendor. This way you can keep those for some of the treasure chests that you can find randomly out in the world, and these, by the way, do scale up to your character, so maybe you can just roll off in the end game with a bunch of keys, get better loot rather than wasting it at a low level and then just replacing those items eventually anyway. Speaking of the end game, which basically means everything after finishing the main campaign, let's talk about the first activity, that of the Tree of Whispers, that I recommend doing because it just gives you some of the most consistent and efficient ways to get specific loot. On one side, because it literally has no cooldown, so once you finish one, you can jump straight into the next. Only the random dungeons and events that get included in it are what change every hour or so. Second of all, the caches give you access to targeted loot. Plus, they have a pretty good chance at legendaries as well. What I mean by targeted loot is that you will see collections of gear of a certain type, like for example caches with just one-handed weapons, or only rings, or only gloves, and so on. This way you can hunt specifically for the type of item that you really need for your build right now and get multiple choices of that variant so that you can grab the most optimal for your current character. Occasionally, the game also offers you caches of chaos from these 3 choices, which don't have the same limitation or include only one type of gear, but instead they drop any gear from any of the different slots. So in this case, I would only recommend them in case all the other options suck for you right now, or if you just want to try out your luck and go for something else instead. Finally, it might happen quite often to get a greater collection as one of the options over there with the other 3, and this in fact is something I would always choose because it always guarantees at least 1 legendary drop, and more often than not it actually gave me 2 or even 3. And that was on top of the fact that they would still provide the rares, so the pool of choices is increased. Now, in terms of the most efficient way to grab the 10 Grim Favors needed to finish one round of these Tree of Whispers is running the major whispers, as in the dungeons, world bosses, and the seething abominations if you plan on some doing PvP. All of these give 5 Grim Favors by default upon completion, so just 2 of them means you're basically done with this round. Plus, they all already drop plenty enough loot as it is, essentially hitting 2 birds with 1 stone. Like if you're hitting a dungeon that is part of the Whispers, you're basically getting all the loot inside of it. Plus, if you complete another one or some other random events, you can just go ahead, take that, and then also the caches from the Tree of Whispers. Meanwhile, medium and small whispers give 3 and 1 Grim Favor respectively each. But in this case, it might still be worth it to do them because oftentimes you might find them spawned in a tight location very close to one another. So maybe you might find something like a cellar, which is quick to complete, next to some open world event, next to maybe some open world boss that you can quickly just defeat, and then you're just done with it in no time. So you can always switch between these if you want to, if you kind of got sick with it with the dungeons, or if the world boss has already been defeated for the week. All in all, I do want to talk about one other endgame activity at the very least, which is the Fields of Hatred, the PvP, PvE zones, which are 2 of located in the dry steppes. And I guess I want to just give a quick explanation because a lot of folks seem to be put off by the fact that it mentions PvP in the title. Well, you can choose to enter this zone and farm in it peacefully without engaging in PvP, but should you activate your Mark of Blood, or if any other player activates their Mark of Blood, then they can attack you. Should everybody decide to just farm peacefully, then you can just focus on getting the loot. Otherwise, you can always come in with a group of friends and reduce the chances of getting ganked. But besides that, these zones spawn a high number of high-level, demon spawn, which, upon defeat, drop a resource called Seeds of Hatred. The bigger the monster, the more seeds they drop, with the biggest of course being the Seething Abomination, which is a roaming boss that you will find randomly in these Fields of Hatred. Generally, it's not too difficult. I'm pretty sure it's a repeat from one of the dungeons, and it drops by far the highest amount of Seeds of Hatred, at least a few thousands per kill. Now, once you've collected enough of these seeds, you will then need to proceed to one of these altars of extraction that you can find several of in the same region. Once here, you will take about 1 minute to purify all the current seeds that you have upon you. This does 2 things. 1, it makes enemies attack you, but it also marks you on the map, so other players can come in and basically attack you to steal them from you. This is about the only way you can lose them besides just leaving the fields, and yeah, that can also delete them, but once you purify all of these seeds, this is when you can then funnel them into actual gear. Because once the ritual is completed successfully, these seeds will now transform into red dust, which you can see right here in your inventory. And with this, you can go ahead and spend it in towns like Denshire to get more gear, transmogs, even mount armors from the vendors inside. So if you want to go get some gear, this will cost 3000 red dust for each individual piece. And no, they do not guarantee legendaries, but they can have awesome looking skins in case you want to unlock more transmogs. The cosmetics vendor is also going to be here, but it's going to be by far one of the most expensive, as character cosmetics and mount armors can cost tens of thousands of red dust per just 1 piece. Luckily, they don't go away from my knowledge, so you can always just come back later or when you have free time. The vendors will also sell some of these cursed scrolls that can help you in PvP situations should you get ganked by other players. Some of them can provide a quick teleportation to a random location in the same fields in case you want to plan your next escape, or provide extra movement speed, damage reduction from players, and even ways to see all the hostile players and other elites all around the zone. Moving on though, there's one endgame activity that I unfortunately found quite disappointing. This is gonna be the Hell Tides, and unfortunately it proved to be the least efficient, mainly because of the rate at which you can acquire loot in this event. So Hell Tides spawn randomly throughout the day. They occupy several regions on the map for like an hour or so. time in which all the mobs there get replaced with high level demons, which now drop a resource called cinders. Once you acquire enough of these cinders, like 75, 125 and 150 respectively, you can open various tortured gifts or caches that spawn around this zone, but unfortunately they only drop one item each, and even that is not guaranteed a legendary. Most important is that you're spending a lot of time going in between these packs. They don't always drop too many cinders, and unless you stumble upon open world events in the Helltide back to back to give you unlimited hordes of enemies to defeat them fast and get faster cinders, you're just wasting a lot of minutes here for basically just one item, time in which you could complete some of the other endgame activities and get a lot more. However, should you be lucky and stumble upon many open world events during these Helltides, then even completing them and getting the chest at the end can give you additional cinders to make things faster. But I think that in its current state, Helltides, at least the caches inside, they need to be slightly buffed, maybe to give you some other additional items on top to make it completely worth it. That, or maybe there's gonna be a point in which you can just one-shot everything in 1 millisecond and just breeze through the whole zone. But until that happens, I found this to be the least efficient of the endgame activities in my opinion. Finally, from here you will want to just go ahead and push higher and higher levels of the nightmare dungeons, get better loot, better sigils, open up even higher level dungeons, rinse and repeat, and that's basically you all the way to level 100. For these you will need nightmare sigils, which the game already gets you started with a few in the early stages, but you will of course get even better and more powerful ones inside the nightmare dungeons that you progressively complete, as well as by crafting them at any occultist. Obviously the ones that drop are random, but the occultist can craft you specific dungeon variants, which give you much harder enemies, but can give you some really useful dungeons if you find a good farming spot. In this case, you can use something called sigil dust, which you also get by breaking down some of the sigils that you no longer use or don't want. Your biggest incentive here, besides the increased XP level, access to higher level enemies, and of course the much better drop rates, is to upgrade your existing glyphs, to expand their range on the Paragon board, further improve their bonuses they provide, and essentially become a lot stronger. Your most important objective is going to be to increase your damage as high as possible. I think that right now, these dungeons favor damage a lot more than defenses. So even if technically you might get 1 or 2 shotted with certain builds, as long as you can clear enemies fast enough and basically one-shot them yourself, they won't have enough time to take you down in any meaningful way. Plus, you have all the other ways to CC them, go past them, and like just to rush the final boss if that's what you want to. Otherwise, you can also farm these enemies for XP, given the fact that they will usually be over you by at least a few levels. But yeah, that's pretty much it with the video. If you want to stay up to date with everything Diablo 4 related, including more guides and gameplay, totally leave a like and subscribe for more, and I'll see you guys in the next video.